Providence and Conversion. John Flavel, 1630–1691. In nothing doth Providence shine forth more gloriously in this world than it doth in this performance for the people of God. How curiously soever its hand had moulded your bodies, how tenderly soever it had preserved them, and how bountifully soever it had provided for them, if it had not also ordered some means or other for your conversion, all the former favors and benefits it had done for you would have signified little. This is the most excellent benefit you ever received from its hand. You are more beholden to it for this than for all your other mercies. And in opening this performance of Providence, I cannot but think your hearts must be deeply affected. This is a subject that every gracious heart loves to steep its thoughts in. It is certainly the sweetest history that ever they repeated. They love to think and talk of it. The places where and instruments by whom this work was wrought are exceedingly endeared to them for the word sake. Yea, endeared to that degree that, for many years after, their hearts have melted when they have but passed occasionally by those places, or but seen the faces of those persons that were used as instruments in the hand of Providence for their good. O blessed places, times, and instruments! Oh, the deep, the sweet impressions, never to be erased out of the memory or heart, that this Providence hath made upon those on whom it wrought this blessed effect at years of discretion and in a more sensible way. But lest any poor soul should be discouraged under the display of this Providence because he cannot remember the time, place, instruments, and manner wherein, and by which conversion work was wrought, I will therefore premise this necessary distinction to prevent injury to some, whilst I design benefit to others. Conversion, as to the subjects of it, may be considered two ways, either as it is more sensibly wrought in persons of riper years, who in their youthful days were more profane and vile, or upon persons in their tender years, into whose hearts grace was more insensibly and indiscernibly instilled by God's blessing upon pious education. In the former sort, the distinct acts of the Spirit, as illuminating, convincing, humbling, drawing them to Christ, and sealing them, are more evident and discernible. In the latter, distinct acts of the Spirit are more obscure and confused. They can remember that God gave them an esteem and liking of godly persons, care of duty, and conscience of sin. But as to the time, place, instruments, and manner of the work, they can give but a slender account of them. However, if the work be savingly wrought in them, there is no reason they should be troubled because the circumstances of it are not so evident to them as they are to others. Let the substance and reality of the work appear, and there is no reason to afflict yourselves because of the uncertainty of such circumstances. But where the circumstances as well as substance are clear to a man, when we can call to remembrance the time when, the place where, the instrument by whom the work was wrought, it must needs be exceeding sweet. They cannot but yield a fresh delight to the soul every time they are reflected upon. Now, there are diverse things in those providences that are versant about this work, which are exceeding sweet and taking, namely, the wonderful strangeness and unaccountableness of this work of Providence in casting us into the way and ordering the occasions, yea, the minutest circumstances about this work. This you find in Acts chapter 8 verse 26–30 following. The eunuch, at that very instant when he was reading the prophet Isaiah, hath an interpreter, one among 1,000 that joins his chariot just as his mind was by a fit occasion prepared to receive the first light of the knowledge of Christ. And how strange was that change, how far soever it went, upon Naaman the Syrian. It is recorded, in 2 Kings chapter 5 verses 1–4. That the Syrians in their incursions should bring away this girl, likely her beauty was the inducement. She must be presented to Naaman's wife and relate to her the power of God that accompanied the prophet Elisha, though you find in that case there had never been an instance given before, Luke chapter 4 verse 27. Doubtless, the whole of this affair was guided by the signal direction of Providence. So, for the conversion of the Samaritans, it is observed in John chapter 4 verse 4, that Christ must needs go that way, i.e., it lay just in the road between Judea and Galilee. At the 6th hour, i.e., high noon, he rests himself upon Jacob's well, still seeming to have no other design but his own refreshment by sitting and drinking there. But oh, what a train of blessed providences follow this, which seemed but an accidental thing. First, the woman of Samaria and then many more in that city are brought to believe in Christ, as you find in verses 29 and 41. The accompanying of others in a neighborly civil visit hath been overruled to the same end. Thus, many of the Jews accompanied Mary unto Bethany, designing only to manifest their civil respect. But there they met Christ, saw the things that he did, and believed on him, Jonah chapter 11 verse 45. The committing of a godly man to prison hath been the method of providence to save the soul of a poor keeper. So, Paul was made a prisoner to make his keeper a spiritual freeman, Acts chapter 16 verse 27. The scattering of ministers and Christians by persecution from cities and towns into the ignorant and barbarous parts of the country hath been the way of providence to find out and bring home some lost sheep that were found there to Jesus Christ, Acts chapter 8 verse 1, 4. The like signal event hath since followed upon the like scattering of godly ministers, whereof there are many pregnant instances this day. A servant running away from his master, likely upon no other design but to live an idle life, yet falling into such places and companies as Providence ordered in a design to him unknown, hath thereby been brought to be the servant of Christ. This was the very case of one Imus, who ran away from his master Philemon to Rome. There, by a strange providence, possibly a mere curiosity to see the prisoners, he falls into Paul's hands, who begat him to Christ in his bonds, Philemon chapter 1 verses 10 to 16. Thus, Paul and Timothy, a sweet and lovely pair, when they were traveling through Phrygia and Galatia, were forbidden to preach the word in Asia, to which probably their minds inclined, Acts chapter 16 verse 6. And when they attempted to go into Bithynia, the Spirit suffered them not, Acts chapter 16 verse 7. But a man of Macedonia, i.e., an angel in the shape or habit of a man of that country, appeared to Paul in a vision and prayed him, saying, Come over into Macedonia, and help us, Acts chapter 16 verse 9. And there did God open the heart of Lydia. Oh, how unsearchable are the ways of providence in leading men to Christ. And now suffer me to reason a little with thy soul. Reader, hast thou been duly sensible of thy obligation to Providence for this priceless favor? Oh, what hath he done for thee? There are divers kinds of mercies conveyed to men by the hand of Providence, but none like this. In all the treasury of its benefits, none is found like this. Did it cast thee into the way of conversion and order the means and occasions of it for thee when thou little thoughtest of any such thing? How dear and sweet should the remembrance of it be to thy soul! I think it should astonish and melt you every time you reflect upon it. Such mercies should never grow stale or look like common things to you. Seriously consider the following particulars. How surprising the mercy was that it performed for you in that day. Providence had a design upon you for your eternal good, which you understood not. The time of mercy was now fully come. The decree was now ready to bring forth that mercy with which it had gone big from eternity, and its gracious design must be executed by the hand of Providence so far as concerned the external means and instruments. How aptly did it cause all things to fall in with that design, though you knew not the meaning of it. Look over all the before-mentioned examples, and you shall see the blessed work of conversion begun upon those souls when they minded it no more than Saul did a kingdom that morning he went out to seek his father's asses, 1 Samuel 9-3, 20. Providence might truly have said to you in that day, as Christ said to Peter, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter, Jonah chapter 13 verse 7. God's thoughts are not as our thoughts, but, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are his thoughts higher than ours and his ways than our ways, Isa 55-9. Little did Zacchaeus think, when he climbed up into the sycamore tree to see Christ as he passed that way, what a design of mercy Christ had upon him. Jesus took thence the occasion of becoming both his guest and Savior, Luke chapter 19 verses 5-8. And as little did some of you think what the aim of Providence was when you went, some out of custom, others out of curiosity, if not worse ends, to hear a sermon. Oh, how stupendous are the ways of God! What a distinguishing and seasonable mercy was ushered in by Providence in that day! It brought you to the means of salvation in a good hour. At that very point of time when the angel troubled the waters, you were brought to the pool, Jonah chapter 5 verse 4. Now the accepted day was come, the Spirit was in the ordinance or providence that converted you, and you were set in the way of it. It may be that you had heard many hundred sermons before, but nothing would stick until now because the hour was not come. The Lord did, as it were, call in the word for such a man, such a woman, and Providence said, Lord, here he is. I have brought him before thee. There were many others under that sermon that received no such mercy. You yourselves have heard many before but not to advantage, as it is said, many lepers were in Israel in the time of Eliseus the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian, Luke chapter 4 verse 27. So, there were many poor unconverted souls besides you under the word that day, and it may be to none of them was salvation sent that day but to you. Oh, Blessed Providence that set you in the way of mercy at that time. What a weighty and important mercy was providentially directed to your souls that day. There are mercies of all sizes and kinds in the hands of Providence to dispense to the sons of men. But among them all, this is the chiefest, to lead and direct them to Christ. For consider. 1. Of all mercies, this comes through most and greatest difficulties. Ephesians chapter 1 verse 19 to 20. 2. This is a spiritual mercy, excelling in dignity of nature all others more than gold excels the dirt under your feet. Revelation chapter 3 verse 18. One such gift is worth thousands of other mercies. 3. This mercy immediately flowing out of the fountain of God's electing love. A mercy never dropped into any but an elect vessel. 1 Thessalonians 1-4-5. 4. This is a mercy that infallibly secures salvation. For as we may argue from conversion to election, looking back, so, from conversion to salvation, looking forward. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 9. 5. This is an eternal mercy, that which will stick by you when father, mother, wife, children, estate, honor, health, and life shall fail thee. Jonah chapter 4 verse 14. Oh, therefore, set a special mark upon that providence that set you in the way of this mercy. It hath performed for thee what all the ministers on earth and angels in heaven could never have performed. This is a mercy that puts weight and value into the smallest circumstance that relates to it.